I was lying on my back under our pickup truck, finishing up an oil change when I first suspected something was off. The sun had nearly set, and under the truck all I could see were the metal guts of the engine and the boots on my feet sticking out. That's when I heard my wife's laughter drifting from the porch. It wasn't her normal, polite chuckle or her fake, please everyone giggle. It was a soft, intimate laugh I hadn't heard her make in years. Certainly not with me. I wiped my hands on a rag and slid out from under the truck as quietly as I could. Marissa stood a few yards away by the porch railing, phone pressed to her ear. She hadn't noticed me. In the orange glow of dusk, I could just make out her expression. She was smiling, twirling a strand of her chestnut brown hair the way she did when she was flirting. "Stop it," I heard her say in a playful whisper. "You're so bad." "No, he's busy. He can't hear." She glanced over her shoulder, scanning the yard, checking if I was still in the garage. I held my breath and remained still in the lengthening shadows beside the truck. She didn't see me, or maybe she didn't care. "Friday at 8, same place. I can't wait either," she purred into the phone. My stomach clenched. There was a syrupy sweetness in her voice that she'd never used with me, at least not in the past decade. It didn't take a genius to figure out she wasn't talking to her sister or a girlfriend from town. Marissa lingered on the porch for a moment after saying goodbye, still smiling to herself, then stepped back inside our house, the screen door banging shut behind her. I let out a long breath. My mind was racing, yet a part of me felt disturbingly calm. I knew what I had just overheard, even if I didn't want to believe it. My wife was making plans. Friday at 8, same place, she'd said. Same place as their last rendezvous, presumably. She had a lover. I should have confronted her right then, demanded answers while the adrenaline was hot in my veins. 10 years ago, I might have. Back when I still had some naive faith in our marriage, I would have marched in and asked who the hell was on that phone. But now I just felt a hollow weight in my gut, and a spark of something else. Not just anger, but calculation. I walked slowly up to the porch, boots heavy on the wooden steps. Through the kitchen window, I saw Marissa setting the table with her free hand. Her phone was still in the other, no doubt mid-text. She looked so composed, humming to herself. The picture of a dutiful wife preparing supper. It made me feel sick. When I stepped inside, she flashed me a quick smile, practiced, breezy, entirely fake to anyone who knew her well. "Dinner in 10, she said lightly. There was a time she would have at least asked how my day was out in the fields or in the workshop. Not anymore. I murmured something like, "Sounds good," and washed up at the kitchen sink, scrubbing the grease off my fingers. My mind was still replaying that laugh, those words. "You're so bad. He can't hear." Marissa dumped some pasta onto 2 plates and sat down across from me at the small kitchen table. The overhead light cast a harsh yellow tone. It highlighted the fine lines beginning to show around her eyes, lines I hadn't noticed until recently. Funny how I could miss details like that, living in the same house. Or maybe I'd just stopped looking at her closely in recent years. We ate in near silence. I pushed noodles around, appetite gone. She seemed preoccupied herself, checking her phone twice under the table, thinking I wouldn't notice. She always assumed I wasn't paying attention. Truth be told, until that evening I usually wasn't. I'd long ago learned to tune out the constant stream of complaints and demands that came out of my wife's mouth. But now every small gesture of hers felt magnified. Every blink, every twitch of a smile was a potential tell. "How's the truck running?" she asked casually, almost making eye contact. It was an attempt at normal conversation, maybe even concern, and it took me off guard for a second. I swallowed. Fine, just change the oil. My voice sounded flat to my own ears. She nodded, stabbing at her plate. That's good. We rely on that old thing so much. There was an odd undertone to her words, like she was saying something else. Or maybe I was just imagining it because my mind was in overdrive. We rarely did small talk anymore. If she needed something fixed, she'd demand I do it, or she'd complain I hadn't done it yet. If I had a long day at work, she'd ask why I was late rather than if I was tired. After 12 years of marriage, we had settled into a routine of terse exchanges and separate lives under one roof. The only time Marissa really turned on the charm with me was when she wanted to impress the neighbors or her friends, playing the role of devoted wife in public, because it made her look good. In private, I was mostly either an inconvenience or invisible to her. So this, her actually asking about the truck unprompted, set off alarm bells in my head. Was she feeling guilty, trying to act nice to cover her tracks, or was she buttering me up for something? I realized I needed to be careful now. Play along. Don't tip my hand that I heard anything. It should run smoothly now, I added, forcing a faint smile. At least it won't leave you stranded on the way to your ladies' nights or whatever. I watched her closely as I said that last part. If she picked up my insinuation, she didn't show it. She only shrugged. I appreciate it. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down at it for a split second. Just a flicker of her eyes, but I caught it. She cleared her throat. Oh, by the way, I'll be heading into town on Friday evening. There's that art gallery opening I mentioned, remember? The one Jenna invited me to. She wasn't even flustered. Lying came as naturally to her as breathing, apparently. We both knew Jenna, her supposed friend, was out of state all week visiting family. I'd heard that directly from Jenna's husband at the feed store. Right, the gallery, I echoed. I kept my tone neutral, as if I took her explanation at face value. I took a bite of cold pasta to give myself a moment to think. Friday at 8, same place. And now Friday evening, an art gallery with Jenna, who was conveniently away. It didn't add up at all, and she had to know I might remember Jenna was gone. Then again, she thought I didn't pay attention to that kind of thing. I felt an unfamiliar tight smile tug at my lips as I looked down at my plate. She was practically handing me her lies on a silver platter, too confident I wouldn't notice. It was almost insulting how little she thought of my awareness. Sure, sounds nice. You want me to drive you or pick you up after? I asked casually. My heart pounded as I awaited her response. She looked up quickly, meeting my eyes for the first time that evening. There was a flash of something, panic maybe, that she smoothed over almost instantly with a laugh. No, I'll be fine. It might go late. You know how these things are. I'll just take the car and you don't need to wait up. She'd be fine, all right. And she definitely didn't want me waiting up. I nodded. All right, enjoy your night then. We lapsed back into silence. Marissa finished eating quickly and stood, taking her plate to the sink. She paused, as if considering saying something more. I waited, expression as neutral as I could keep it. Part of me half hoped she'd come out and say something, maybe even slip up and admit what she was really doing Friday. But she just gave me that thin smile again. Thanks for fixing the truck, she murmured, almost sincere sounding. Then she headed upstairs, leaving me alone with 2 half-eaten plates and a head full of dark, swirling suspicions. I didn't move for a long time. The kitchen around me grew dimmer as the final daylight drained from the windows. The only sounds were the ticking of the old wall clock and the distant buzz of cicadas outside. I stared down at my cold dinner and realized I couldn't recall the last time Marissa and I had sat down to eat together without some sort of argument. Perhaps I should have been angry at her deceit, or devastated that my wife was likely stepping out with another man. But instead, what I felt was a strange calm, like the eerie stillness right before a tornado touches down. I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to storm upstairs and yell. I wasn't going to beg her for the truth, or accuse her and give her the chance to lie straight to my face again. No. If I wanted answers, I'd have to get them myself. I cleared the dishes, dumped the uneaten pasta in the trash, and washed up. My movements were unhurried, automatic, belying the adrenaline beginning to surge through me. If Marissa was really meeting someone Friday at 8, I would find out exactly who and where. And I wouldn't stop at just finding out. A new thought crystallized in my mind as I dried my hands and looked out the window into the now darkened yard. This wasn't just a moment of suspicion. It was the start of something. I felt a small, grim smile forming, surprising even myself. She thought I was just a simple, oblivious country mechanic who wouldn't notice the wool being pulled over his eyes. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Friday couldn't come fast enough. In the meantime, I played the role of my usual self, distracted, oblivious, busy with chores and my part-time repair jobs around town. If Marissa noticed anything different about my behavior, she didn't let on. She was mostly absent anyway, spending long hours running errands or off at her yoga class in the next town over. At least that was the excuse of the week. I spent those days preparing in my own way. On Wednesday, I drove into the city, about an hour away, under the pretense of picking up a tractor part. In truth, I visited a small electronics store and bought a dashboard camera and a GPS tracker that I'd seen online. The technology was foreign to me. I'm more comfortable with wrenches than wiretaps. But the young guy at the store walked me through how they worked. The GPS tracker was a small magnetic device I could slip onto the underside of a car. With the right app on my phone, it would show me the car's location in real time. The dash cam was for my truck, but it could double as a covert camera if needed since it was small and had its own battery. That evening, while Marissa soaked in the tub upstairs, I stepped into the garage and carefully attached the tracker inside the rear bumper of her sedan. I made sure it was tucked out of sight. I also retrieved an old digital camera with a good zoom lens that I used back when I was into bird watching. It had dust on it from years of neglect, much like the romantic part of our marriage, I thought wryly. I charged its battery and tested it. Still worked fine. Every time I saw Marissa that week, acting as if nothing was wrong, I felt a tightness in my chest. The calm I'd found the night I overheard her had an edge of simmering anger now. But I channeled that anger into focus. There were moments I doubted myself, wondered if I was blowing things out of proportion, if maybe I had misinterpreted something. Then I'd remember her voice on that phone call, the way she lit up for someone else, and any second guessing evaporated. On Thursday, she mentioned again her gallery opening plan, casually reminding me she'd be out Friday night. I just nodded and said something like, "Have a good time." Inside, my heart was pounding, anticipating what I might discover in just 24 hours. Friday arrived warm and cloudy. All day I moved through tasks on autopilot, glancing at the clock every other minute. By late afternoon, I was restless, double-checking my preparations. Camera in the truck, check. Fuel tank full, check. Phone fully charged and linked to the tracking app, check. I was determined not to miss a thing. At 6:30, Marissa emerged from the shower in a towel while I pretended to read on the bed. I watched slyly over the top of my book as she rifled through her closet for something to wear. She passed over her everyday jeans and t-shirts, instead pulling out a slinky maroon blouse and a skirt that I'd rarely seen. It was an outfit more suited to cocktails in a city lounge than any art gallery in our small town. My jaw clenched, but I said nothing. She spent a good hour doing her hair and makeup. I caught a glimpse of her in the bathroom mirror as she carefully applied lipstick and even perfume. Chanel, an expensive bottle I'd given her for our anniversary last year that she'd never bothered to use until now. The irony stung, but I swallowed it down. At 7:45, just as dusk began to settle, Marissa clicked down the stairs in high heels. She almost never wore heels unless she wanted to impress people. I was in the living room ostensibly watching TV, though I couldn't have said what was on the screen if my life depended on it. She gave me a cursory glance. "How do I look?" she asked, doing a little twirl. The skirt flared around her thighs. She did look beautiful. I had to acknowledge that even through my anger. Wavy chestnut hair falling around her shoulders. That deep red blouse flattering her figure. For a moment, I remembered the younger version of her, when we were both 20-somethings freshly in love, when she'd dress up like this for me. That memory twisted like a knife in my gut. I forced a smile. "You look great. All set for the gallery?" She held my gaze just a second too long, as if trying to detect sarcasm, but I kept my expression mild. "Yes," she said brightly. "It's a new collection of modern art pieces. Jenna said it's the event of the season." She was laying it on thick. I just nodded. "Well, have fun. Don't drink and drive. Call me if you need a ride later." It felt bizarre, playing the concerned husband sending his wife off for a night out, knowing full well she was likely meeting her lover, but the charade would hopefully keep her unsuspecting. "I will," she said. Then she grabbed her purse and keys. "Don't wait up. I might be late." "Of course." I kept my eyes on the TV as she walked to the door. My fingers gripped the armrest of the couch until I heard the door close behind her. The minute I saw her car's taillights receding down the driveway, I sprang into action. I slipped on a dark jacket and a baseball cap, grabbed my keys and my camera, and hurried out to my pickup. The tracking app on my phone showed a little blinking dot moving steadily along County Road 6. I knew where the art gallery was supposed to be, in the opposite direction. As expected, Marissa was heading toward the highway that led to the next town. I followed at a distance, making sure to keep at least a few cars and a quarter-mile between us. On a Friday night, the two-lane road had a fair number of vehicles, which was good cover. The summer sky had fully darkened, and intermittent lightning flashed on the horizon from a distant storm, but no rain fell yet. After about 20 minutes, her dot took the exit for Highway 11, which led toward Greenville, a larger town about 30 miles away. I stayed on her tail, far back enough not to be noticed. My heart thudded with a mix of dread and adrenaline. I realized I was clenching the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Another 15 minutes passed. Then I saw her signal and turn off the highway onto a rural route that led toward the lake. That road mostly just had a couple of cabin rental places and the old lakeside motel, which was basically a truck stop with hourly rates, a seedy spot well out of town where nobody you knew would see you. My chest tightened. This was it. I killed my headlights and slowed down as I approached the turn. A few hundred yards ahead, I spotted the faint glow of the lakeside motel's neon sign blinking through the trees. I pulled over onto the shoulder before I got too close, parking behind a clump of bushes. From here, I'd go on foot. Grabbing my camera, I hopped out and moved quietly along the side of the road. The cicadas and tree frogs were loud, masking the crunch of gravel under my boots. As I got closer, I ducked behind a stand of pines near the motel entrance. From that vantage, I could see the front of the motel's U-shaped layout. It was the kind of rundown place with only one floor, each room door opening directly to the outside parking lot. The lot was half empty. Under one of the few working lamps, I spotted Marissa's silver sedan. It was parked next to a red BMW convertible that looked out of place in this dump. I didn't see anyone outside, and the only light in the lot was a flickering bulb near the motel office. I crept closer, staying in the shadows. The sedan was empty, of course. They must already be inside a room. My guess was they'd picked one toward the far end, away from the office and the road for privacy. Anger surged hot in my veins as I carefully made my way behind the row of rooms, sticking to the darkness by the trees. The cheap window curtains were drawn on most units. I counted the doors and tried to deduce which room they might be in. Likely one of the last units. My heart hammered as I stepped silently over an old fallen branch. Then, muffled but clear enough in the still night, I heard a woman's laughter. It was Marissa, unmistakably, coming from the second to last room. It was followed by a man's low murmur that I couldn't make out, his tone playful. My stomach turned. I moved closer until I was just beside the window of that room. The curtains were a dull mustard color and didn't quite meet in the middle. There was a slender, inch-wide gap. Taking a steadying breath, I leaned forward and peered through the slit into the room beyond. At first, my eyes took a second to adjust to the dim lamplight inside. But I could see enough. Two figures were entwined on the bed, a tangle of limbs half covered by rumpled sheets. I saw my wife clearly, her brown hair loose across her bare shoulders, her face flushed and smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was straddling a man beneath her, moving in a slow, familiar rhythm. I felt as if I'd been punched in the chest, yet I couldn't look away. The man sat up to kiss her neck, and I finally saw his face. It was Adam Pierce, of course. I let out a breath of bitter confirmation. Adam friggin' Pierce, the guy who ran the regional farm equipment dealership and had recently been appointed head of the town chamber of commerce. He was in his mid-40s, a few years older than us, known for hosting lavish parties at his lake house and schmoozing every local politician. He was also married, with 2 kids in high school. We weren't friends, but I'd shaken his hand at the last county fair, completely unaware he'd been sleeping with my wife behind my back. Marissa's nails trailed down his back as they moved together, and he gave a low groan. The sound snapped me out of my stunned voyeurism. My hands were trembling, either from rage or heartbreak or both. Probably both. I forced myself to step away from the window, careful not to make noise. I backed up into the cover of the trees, almost tripping over a tree root, and finally felt safe to breathe again. My face was hot, and I realized there were tears in my eyes. I wasn't sure if it was from anger or the sheer pain of seeing it confirmed so vividly. My wife, in a cheap motel bed with Adam Pierce, laughing, passionate, alive in ways she never seemed to be with me. I wanted to burst in there and rip him off her, make them both hurt as much as I hurt. For a fleeting moment, I pictured myself kicking in the door, fists flying. I imagined his smug face shocked and bloody, her screaming in surprise and fear. The fantasy was satisfying in a primitive way, but I knew it was a terrible idea. I'd end up in jail and they'd still somehow twist it to make me the bad guy. No. A confrontation now would only ruin the element of surprise and any chance I had at a smarter form of justice. If I was going to truly make them pay, I needed to do it right. I swiped at my eyes, steadying myself. The camera hung around my neck untouched. I'd been too engrossed in the ugly scene to even snap a photo. Cursing under my breath, I raised it now and quietly crept back to the window. Through the gap in the curtain, the two were now lying tangled together in the aftermath, talking in low voices. I couldn't make out words, but their tone sounded relaxed, even joking. I snapped a few photos of them on the bed, zooming in enough to clearly identify Marissa and Adam. Each click of the camera shutter sounded agonizingly loud to me, but they were laughing at something and didn't notice. Satisfied I had at least some evidence, I slunk away, heart pounding. As I made my way back around the building toward the parking lot, I spotted something on the ground by where their cars were parked. A discarded condom wrapper glittering in the dirt, unmistakable in the beam of a nearby light. I took a picture of it too, for what it was worth. A bitter little trophy of their betrayal. The first fat raindrops began to splatter on the pavement as the storm finally caught up. I hurried back to my truck, adrenaline carrying me faster than I thought possible. Once inside, I sat breathing hard for a moment, rain tapping on the windshield. I checked the photos on the camera's screen. They were grainy in the low light, but clear enough. Marissa's face laughing as she lay on a pillow, Adam propped on an elbow beside her. Anyone who saw these would know exactly what they were doing. Proof. I had the proof now. I didn't feel the triumph I thought I would. My hands shook and my stomach churned like I might be sick. But beneath the shock and hurt, that cold, calm resolve from days before was solidifying into something rock hard. I carefully tucked the camera away and started the truck. I wanted to peel out of there into the night, but I forced myself to drive slowly until I was well past the motel road. I didn't head straight home. Instead, I pulled into a vacant rest stop a few miles away and just sat there in the darkness, gripping the wheel and trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions inside me. My wife's affair was no longer just a suspicion or an intuition. It was fact. And now I knew exactly who she was risking everything for. A man who was arguably more narcissistic than she was, if local gossip was any indicator. Adam was known for his ego and his dirty tactics in business. In a way, they were a perfect match. Two people who'd smile at you at the church potluck and then stab you in the back to get what they wanted. Lightning forked in the sky in the distance, illuminating the interior of my truck for a split second. In that flash of light, I caught my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I barely recognized the eyes staring back at me. They were cold, focused, determined. I pulled out my phone, swiped to the voice recorder app, and started a short recording as documentation, for legal purposes and maybe for myself, to remember exactly how I felt at this moment. The screen's glow lit up my face. "This is my name," I said quietly, stating my name for the record. My voice was steadier than I expected. "It's date and time. I just left the lakeside motel where I witnessed my wife, Marissa, last name, having sexual relations with Adam Pierce. I have photo evidence as well. I am documenting this because..." I paused, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. "Because I need to remind myself of what I saw, in case I ever doubt why I'm about to do what I'm going to do." I ended the recording. It was a strangely formal thing to do in such an emotional moment, but it felt like the first step in a plan that was already forming in my mind. A plan not just to confront them, but to make sure they paid dearly for what they'd done. As the rain turned into a full summer downpour outside, I found myself oddly calm again. Betrayal is a powerful thing. It can destroy a man, or it can light a fire inside him that nothing can extinguish. I had been a fool for a long time in my marriage, content to live unhappily, thinking that was my lot in life. Now these two had given me something precious, in a twisted way. Clarity. I knew exactly who Marissa was and what she thought of me, and I knew exactly the caliber of scum Adam Pierce was. They thought they were being sneaky, maybe even thinking I was too dull to ever catch on. They believed they'd get away with it, continue their affair and manipulate me until they were ready to discard me like an old piece of farm equipment. Perhaps Marissa figured she'd divorce me eventually, take half of everything, including the farm my father left me, then go live a cushy life with Adam's money. Who knows what lies he was feeding her? Maybe that he'd leave his wife for her. Maybe promises of some grand future together. Well, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not by a long shot. I had the evidence. Now I needed to think carefully about my next moves. I wasn't a violent man by nature. I'd never even thrown a punch in my adult life. But I understood now that there were other ways to hurt people. Ways that leave deeper scars than a broken nose or a bruise. Sitting in that dark rest stop, the air thick with the smell of wet asphalt and the sound of thunder rolling overhead, I started making a list in my mind. Evidence, check. Next, more evidence. I needed to gather everything I could to ensure neither of them could weasel out of this. Adultery might not be a crime, but I suspected this affair was only one of many unethical things in Adam's life. Small towns hide big secrets, and he had his fingers in a lot of pies. If I dug enough, I might turn up something truly damaging. And Marissa, well, I knew her well enough to guess how she'd react if I just confronted her with what I knew. She'd deny, then deflect, then probably blame me somehow. Narcissists are predictable. She might even try to play the victim or threaten to take me for all I had in a divorce if I caused a fuss. No, I wouldn't confront her yet. Instead, I'd make her life a living hell from the shadows, step by step, until she had nowhere left to turn. And I'd do the same to her dear lover boy. Lightning flashed again, and I made a silent vow right then and there. I would devote every ounce of my intelligence, patience, and cunning to this cause. Over the years, I'd let myself become the quiet one, the doormat in the relationship, mostly to keep the peace. But I wasn't weak. I had simply been holding back. They had no idea who they were dealing with now. Underscore, 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 underscore. The next morning I woke up before dawn, having hardly slept. Marissa was still out cold, breathing softly beside me, as if nothing at all had happened. I slipped out of bed and quietly got dressed. My mind was already working through the next steps. First things first. Gather more ammunition. The photos I'd taken were a start, but I wanted every possible scrap of evidence. If I was going to scorch their earth, I'd do it thoroughly. While Marissa sipped her Saturday morning coffee and scrolled on her phone in the kitchen, likely checking social media or maybe even texting him, I headed outside. I told her I needed to change the spark plugs on the tractor. In reality, I was intent on searching her car while I had the chance. The garage was detached from the house, and inside, the silver sedan sat innocently enough. I opened the driver's door gently and began to rummage. The interior was neat. Marissa loved to keep up appearances, even with her car. But I knew the little nooks and crannies people forget. I checked under the seats. Nothing but an old lipstick. The glove compartment held the usual: registration, some tissues, gum, and a receipt from a place called Lakeside Diner dated 2 weeks ago. Lakeside Diner is the little restaurant attached to that motel. My pulse jumped. I folded the receipt and slid it into my pocket. I popped the trunk. It was mostly empty except for her emergency roadside kit and a gym bag. I unzipped the bag to find a change of clothes, a low-cut top and a pair of jeans that I rarely saw her wear, along with a travel toothbrush and a small makeup pouch, a go-bag for her affair rendezvous, no doubt. Disgust churned in my stomach. As I lifted the false bottom where the spare tire was, I struck gold. Duct-taped to the wheel well was a slim black cell phone, the burner phone I suspected she had. I carefully peeled it free and clicked it on. No password lock. She probably assumed it was hidden well enough not to need one, or she didn't want to risk forgetting a PIN. Bold of her, or just arrogant. I glanced at the garage door. It was closed, and the house was a good 50 yards away, but I still felt exposed. Heart thudding, I scanned through the phone's contents as quickly as possible. There were text messages, lots of them, between her and a number saved only as A. Adam, obviously. Reading them felt like pouring salt on a raw wound, but I forced myself to do it, for the intel. Most were explicit or lovey-dovey. Marissa, I can't stop thinking about last night. You were insatiable. Adam, I'll tell him I'm with Jenna again. He's clueless as ever. Marissa, when can you sneak away next? I need you. One from just a couple days ago made me grit my teeth. Marissa, he actually bought that I'm going to an art thing, LOL. I almost feel bad for him. They were laughing at me. Further up, I found something perhaps even more important. A text from Adam. Adam, make sure you get those documents from his office. We might need them for the lawyers. I frowned. Documents? Lawyers? Then Marissa's reply. Marissa, I will. He never checks the safe. I know the combo. We'll have everything we need to make sure I come out on top. My blood ran cold as realization set in. They weren't just fooling around. They were preparing. That snake was coaching her on how to gut me if she filed for divorce. Maybe he had some high-powered attorney guiding him, ready to help her take everything. After all, Adam's own wealth would be protected if he got her to squeeze me for assets instead. Self-serving bastard. If they were planning that route, they might act soon. They probably expected that at some point I'd find out or Marissa would leave me, and they were setting the stage to ruin me when it happened. Maybe that was why she was still sticking around at all, gathering whatever documents those were. Financial records, property titles. Who knows? Well, forewarned is forearmed. I took pictures of those particular texts with my own phone for safekeeping. Then, I carefully placed the burner back where I found it and retaped it. I put everything else back in place exactly as it was and shut the trunk softly. I felt a little sick as I stepped out of the garage. My own wife plotting with her lover to bleed me dry, on top of betraying me. The depth of her treachery was even worse than I'd thought. But oddly, knowing their scheme cleared my head. I wasn't just reacting now. I was on the offensive. When I walked back into the kitchen, Marissa looked up from her phone and gave me a perfunctory smile. All done? She asked. For now, I said evenly. I poured myself a cup of coffee, hoping my face didn't betray anything. She was still in her robe, seemingly relaxed. She didn't pry about what I'd been doing. Why would she? I was just the dumb husband tinkering with machines, as always. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, looking at this woman I'd spent 12 years with, marveling at how much I truly didn't know her. She sensed me watching because she finally raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked. I shrugged, forcing a slight yawn. "Just realized I might need a tractor part I don't have. I might run into the city later today to pick it up." It was a half-truth. I did plan to go into the city today, but not for tractor parts. She just sipped her coffee, disinterested. "Have fun." A thought struck me. "Hey, you remember where we put the paperwork for the farm loan refinance we did last year? I wanted to double-check something on the interest rate." It was a lie. I remembered the rate fine. I was testing her. Her eyes flashed for just a second. "Why? Something wrong?" I shook my head casually. "Nah, just thinking of whether it's worth paying it off early. Might save on interest." Marissa relaxed a bit. "Oh, those papers should be in the office filing cabinet, I think. Folder labeled farm or something." She gave a little wave of her hand, as if it were trivial. I nodded and got up. Our home office was a small room off the hall where I kept a desk, a filing cabinet, and the household computer. Importantly, it had a safe bolted to the floor, where I stored things like the deed to the property inherited from my dad, titles to our vehicles, and a backup drive with scans of financial documents. It wasn't a fancy safe, just a fireproof combination one. Marissa had basically admitted she knew the combination, an old high school football number of mine. I'd once shared it early in our marriage for emergencies. I'd never changed it. Why would I suspect I needed to keep my wife out of my safe? I opened the office door and stepped inside. From the doorway, I could see the safe tucked under the desk. Nothing looked disturbed, but who knows if she had rifled through it while I was out. A surge of protectiveness ran through me. That safe held everything that was truly mine from before our marriage, including the deed to the farm. I quickly spun the combination and opened the heavy door. A quick inventory: deed, titles, some cash, my grandfather's watch, and a thick envelope of documents like bank statements. It appeared intact. I rifled through to see if anything was missing. Didn't look like it. If she had gotten something from here, she'd put things back or copied them. Hard to tell. I locked it back up, and as I did, I made a decision. I would be changing the combination and also relocating the most critical items soon. Walking back out, I told Marissa I was heading out to get that part. She barely acknowledged it. I grabbed my laptop, which I rarely used, and a couple of personal documents from the safe under the guise of wanting to sort through them later. My destination: a law office 2 towns over. I remembered that a buddy from high school, Travis, had become a lawyer dealing with family law, and he practiced in a different county, far enough that word wouldn't get back to anyone in our town. I wasn't sure if he'd be working on a Saturday, but I called him from the road, and to my relief, he agreed to meet me at his office by noon. An hour later, I sat with my lawyer friend Travis in a small conference room and laid out the basics of what was happening. He confirmed I was in a strong legal position. With clear evidence of Marissa's adultery, I could file for divorce on fault grounds, which would likely prevent her from getting alimony or much of our assets. He advised me to quietly secure any joint finances and remove important documents from the house before tipping my hand. I should gather bank records and credit card statements, especially any showing money spent on the affair. I agreed, planning to transfer half our savings into a new account and safeguard my property deed and other documents. Travis also noted that Adam's wife would probably be very interested to know what her husband had been up to, and that exposing the affair to her could indirectly help my case by cutting off whatever support Adam might give Marissa. I assured him that was already on my agenda. After I left Travis's office, I had a folder of paperwork to get the ball rolling. and a clearer idea of the legal timeline. He'd draft the divorce petition and have a process server on standby to serve Marissa once we filed early in the week. I told him I'd be in touch about exactly when to drop the hammer. I spent the rest of Saturday following Travis's advice. I drove to my bank and opened a new personal account that afternoon. Then I quietly transferred half of our joint savings into it and also set up my paycheck to deposit there going forward. I left our checking alone for now, since she used it for monthly expenses, and any sudden emptying of accounts might tip her off. The savings move she wouldn't notice unless she logged in, which she rarely did as I handled that side of things. Next, I went home and copied all important digital files from my home computer onto an encrypted USB drive. That included tax returns, bank statements, anything I thought she might try to grab or that I'd need for the divorce. I then removed the original paper documents from the safe and put them in a box, which I stashed in the trunk of my truck for now. Those would go to a safe deposit box at the bank first thing Monday. By the time evening rolled around, I felt I'd shored up my defenses. Legally and financially, I was positioned to minimize the damage of her inevitable fury once she learned what was coming. Marissa seemed to have no clue all day. She spent most of it out shopping, which likely included a meetup with Adam, since I noticed on the tracker she took a highway detour at one point. I didn't bother to follow this time. What was one more tryst? When she got back in the late afternoon, I was in the yard splitting some firewood, working off my anger in a satisfying physical way. She barely said hello, carrying in some bags of stuff she probably bought with my money. I noted one bag was from a luxury boutique downtown. Interesting, given her credit card was a joint account I'd see the statement for soon. Perhaps a gift for herself or something to wear for him. It fueled my resolve to no end. That night, I lay in bed next to her again, both of us silent. She was tapping away on her phone, smiling at whatever was on the screen, likely another message to him. I resisted the urge to grab the phone and smash it against the wall. Not yet. Instead, I turned away and closed my eyes, envisioning the fallout to come. Sunday and Monday were a blur of discrete action. By Monday noon, Travis had filed the divorce petition at the county courthouse. By Monday evening, the process server handed Marissa the papers right in our driveway. That moment was something I'd replay in my head with grim satisfaction. I was in the barn when I heard her car pull up after work. I peeked out a window to watch. A man stepped out of a separate car in our drive and approached her just as she got out. I saw her confused expression as he asked her name and then offered the envelope. She took it, and even from afar I could see her face redden as she realized what it was. She looked toward the house, jaw dropped, then back at the server, who was already walking away. She shouted my name. Once, twice, voice shrill and panicked. I stayed where I was, letting her stew a minute. She stormed into the house, and a moment later I heard her yelling from room to room looking for me. I finally exited the barn and came in through the back door deliberately late. "You!" she hissed when she saw me in the kitchen, envelope crumpled in her fist. Her eyes were wild, a mix of fury and shock. "What the hell is this?" I wiped my brow calmly, as if oblivious. "It looks like divorce papers. I assume they're self-explanatory." She sputtered, waving the papers. "You're divorcing me. On what grounds?" She scanned the documents, and I knew she'd see the accusations of adultery spelled out clearly. Her hands began to shake. "Adultery? Are you insane?" I felt an icy satisfaction at seeing her play dumb. I merely folded my arms. "Cut the crap, Marissa. I know everything." She stared at me, eyes wide. For a split second, I thought I saw fear there. Then her defense mechanism kicked in. Attack mode. She launched into a tirade, hurling insults and even trying to blame me for her actions. I let her spit venom for a few seconds before I cut in coldly. Was it attention you were after at the lakeside motel? The effect was immediate. She blanched. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Yeah, that's right. I was there, Friday night. I saw you with Adam. His name came out like a curse. I have pictures, so drop the act. Marissa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She backed up a step, bumping into the counter. For once, she was speechless. I pressed on, voice low. All this time you thought I was clueless, that you could do whatever you wanted and I'd never notice. Well, surprise. And now you can take your lies and get the hell out of my life. She recovered enough to spit back. You were spying on me? That's sick. You had no right. I laughed, short and harsh. No right? My wife was screwing another man and plotting to rob me blind. I had every right to gather proof. Her face contorted with rage and denial. You're crazy. Adam and I, it's not what you think. Don't insult my intelligence, Marissa. I'd never spoken to her in such a hard tone. It actually shut her up again. I read your little messages, too. Your second phone. I know about the files you were after in the safe. I know about every lie you've told. Her eyes darted side to side, like a trapped animal's. I realized she wasn't just angry. She was panicking, trying to figure out how much I truly knew and how she could possibly regain control of the narrative. She changed tack to faux remorse, her voice breaking on cue. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen. Fat tears appeared in her eyes. I'd seen this act before, but never directed at me. It was always how she manipulated others. She reached a hand toward me. Listen, I know I hurt you. I made a mistake. Stop, I said sharply, and she froze mid-reach. We're way past apologies. Do you think I'm a fool? That I'll just forgive and forget because you shed a few tears? I shook my head. This divorce is happening. Don't try to fight it, because you will lose. I've got evidence ready to hand over to anyone who needs to see it. Her sorrowful mask flickered at that, replaced by venom. You bastard, she hissed. You set me up. That almost made me smile. Set you up? You walked into this all on your own. But sure, tell yourself whatever helps you sleep at night. Not that you'll have many peaceful nights ahead. She suddenly tore the divorce papers in half and threw them on the floor. I'm not signing a damn thing. You want a war? You'll get one. My lover has more influence and money than you can imagine. You think this will ruin me? It'll ruin you. There it was. The ugly truth, laid bare in her threat. Gone was any pretense of regret or denial. She was baring her fangs. I felt oddly calm in the face of it. We'll see, I said simply. She glared, then turned on her heel and stormed toward the stairs. I'm getting my things, she declared. On her way, she snapped, I'll be staying at a hotel, and you'll be hearing from my lawyer, you piece of shit. I almost smiled at that. Oh, I have no doubt I will. Perhaps Mr. Pierce can recommend a good one to you. Her footsteps pounded up to the bedroom. A minute later, I heard things being violently thrown around as she likely yanked clothes off hangers and grabbed whatever she could. I stood in the kitchen, adrenaline coursing through me but feeling confident. The hardest part of the direct confrontation was over. Marissa came barreling back down with a suitcase. One I recognized as a fancy new piece likely gifted by Adam, since I'd never seen it before. She was still in a furious frenzy. Don't think this is the end of it, she said, as she shoved past me toward the door. You have no idea what I'm capable of. You'll regret doing this to me. It was almost laughable. her acting like the victim when she was the one who caused all this. I opened the front door for her with a mock polite gesture. "Take care, Marissa. Give my regards to Adam," I said coolly. She let out a wordless scream of frustration and stomped out to her car, tossing the suitcase in. In a spray of gravel, she tore out of the driveway. I stood on the porch watching her go, my heart pounding. I expected to feel devastated watching my wife leave for good, but instead I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The monster was out of my house. Of course, the battle was only just beginning. She would run straight to Adam, and they'd no doubt coordinate their next move. But I wasn't going to give them the chance to regroup and counterattack. I already had Phase 2 in motion. That same evening, I put together several manila envelopes with copies of select evidence, a few of the more damning photos, printouts of her and Adam's lovey texts, including the one about using lawyers to come out on top, which made their intentions crystal clear. I included a short anonymous note in each, something simple like, "Thought you should know what Mr. Pierce has been up to." One envelope was addressed to Cynthia Pierce, Adam's wife. I found their home address easily via a quick public record search. Being prominent in the area, their info wasn't hard to find. Another was addressed to the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce, where Adam was the Golden Boy president. I figured the esteemed community leaders would be interested to see their paragon's extracurricular activities. A third envelope went to the local newspaper's editor. Scandal among small-town elites is always juicy news, especially with photographic evidence. I phrased that note as if from a concerned citizen or perhaps a disgruntled employee of Adam's, someone fed up with his immorality and hypocrisy. The paper might not publish anything immediately without verification, but it'd definitely set tongues wagging if they followed up. I mailed those out from a post office in the city first thing Sunday, making sure they were untraceable to me. Gloves on, paid cash for postage, fake return address. They'd arrive at their destinations Monday or Tuesday. In the meantime, I enacted a little digital retribution too. Using Marissa's laptop, which she'd foolishly left logged into her email, I quietly sent a message from her account to Adam's work email Sunday night. Nothing explicit, just a friendly note from Marissa asking when she could see him again and whether his wife was suspicious. I knew that email might be seen by his wife if she had any access, or by IT at his company, or who knows. It was a small seed of chaos to plant alongside the rest. By Tuesday, the storm was truly brewing. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that the Chamber of Commerce had called an emergency meeting that afternoon, presumably to discuss some unfortunate allegations about their president. By Wednesday, Adam had resigned his chamber position to focus on personal matters. That told me the board had confronted him with the evidence, and he couldn't wriggle free. I also learned through the grapevine that Cynthia, his wife, had kicked him out of their house. Someone spotted him moving into a motel in town. It seems my envelope found its mark. I can only imagine the domestic explosion when she opened that package and saw pictures of Marissa wrapped around her husband. I felt a twinge of sympathy for her and their kids, but ultimately, this was on Adam and Marissa. They made their choices. The fallout was theirs to bear. As for Marissa, I got a call from my lawyer that her newly retained attorney, no doubt paid for by Adam, was already trying to expedite a hearing or mediation. They were scrambling to get ahead of the narrative, maybe to accuse me of something to leverage a better settlement for her. But with the evidence I had, they were on the back foot, and they knew it. I also canceled the one credit card that was under my name, which Marissa was authorized to use. Petty, perhaps, but I wasn't about to finance any more of her escapades. According to a friend who worked at that upscale boutique in town, Marissa had come in on Tuesday to pick up an item on hold, only to have her card declined. She left furious and empty-handed. When I heard that, I couldn't stop the grin from spreading on my face. Meanwhile, around our small town, the gossip mill was churning at full tilt. Affairs are hard to keep secret in a rural community, especially one as high-profile as this. By the end of the week, everyone from the diner waitress to the church pastor's wife knew about Marissa and Adam's sordid affair and spectacular downfall. I mostly stayed at the farm, tending to chores and letting things unfold. Occasionally, I'd get a text or call of support from someone who'd caught wind, like my neighbor Bill, who wrote, "Heard about Marissa. You deserve better, man. Let me know if you need anything." It was strange, after years of isolation in an unhappy marriage, to suddenly feel the sympathy of others. Humiliating in some ways, yes, but also validating. People knew I'd been wronged, and that goes a long way in a small town. It was Friday, 1 week since I caught them at the motel, when Adam finally decided to confront me directly. I was in the barn, loading some bales of hay, when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel drive. Through the gap in the door, I saw a shiny red BMW pull up. It was the same one from the motel parking lot. My pulse quickened, but I kept calm. I walked out into the sunlight, wiping sweat from my hands, and watched as Adam climbed out of his car. He looked significantly less polished than usual, eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled, shirt wrinkled. The man looked like he hadn't slept in days. Still, his posture radiated anger and entitlement. "Where is she?" he barked at me across the yard. I raised an eyebrow. "Hello to you too, Adam." He slammed the car door. "Cut the crap. Where's Marissa? I know she came here earlier." I genuinely didn't know what he was talking about. "She's not here. And even if she was, you're trespassing on my property. So I suggest—" He marched toward me, fists clenched. "You think you're so clever, huh? Ruining my life, dragging my name through the mud." His face was turning red. I squared my shoulders and maintained my distance. "You managed that fine on your own. Actions have consequences. Or did you think you were untouchable?" He sneered. "Last chance," he growled. "You back off this smear campaign, or you'll regret it. There are ways to make your life hell that you haven't even considered. You know I have friends in high places." I felt a small twinge of alarm at that. He did have connections, maybe a judge or two in his pocket or a deputy in town who owed him favors. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I calmly reached behind me to my back pocket, where my phone was recording audio of this encounter. With one tap, I stopped the recording. I had exactly what I needed. Him on tape, threatening me. Pulling the phone out, I held it up with a slight smile. "Did you get all that?" I asked rhetorically, then answered my own question. "Yep, looks like it did." Adam's eyes darted to the phone, realizing what I meant. His face went pale, then twisted with rage. He lunged forward, trying to snatch it. But I was ready. I slipped it into my other hand and stepped back quickly. "Don't even try," I warned sharply. I was near the barn wall and grabbed the pitchfork I'd left leaning there, brandishing it between us. I wasn't about to stab him, but it kept him at bay, making him think twice. He halted, breathing hard. "You're finished, Pierce," I said, my voice low and steady. "You just threatened me on record. If anything happens to me or my property, if any mysterious legal troubles suddenly come my way, this recording goes straight to the cops and the media. Same with all the other evidence I have on you. So if your powerful friends plan on helping you, you might want to warn them that they'd be tying themselves to a sinking ship." He stood there trembling, not with fear, but with impotent fury. For a moment I thought he might actually charge at me, unarmed or not, but then the fight in him seemed to deflate. This wasn't a boardroom or a backroom deal where he held the cards. Here on my turf, he had nothing. "Marissa's not here," I repeated, "and I don't care where she is, frankly. Now get off my land." Adam stared at me, hatred burning in his eyes, but he didn't have a retort. He turned and stalked back to his car. Just before getting in, he spat on the ground like a petulant teenager. "This isn't over," he muttered. I leaned on the pitchfork and watched him. "Yes, it is. You just can't admit it yet." He gunned the engine and sped away, leaving me standing in a cloud of dust. I realized my heart was hammering, but I felt a surge of grim triumph. Not only had I taken him down in the public eye, but face to face I'd shown him I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I sent the recording of his threat to a secure backup, and also forwarded a copy to Travis, just in case. It never hurts to have your lawyer aware of such things. In the days that followed, the aftershocks of the whole ordeal gradually settled. Adam, I heard, took a leave of absence from running his dealership to focus on personal issues. His marriage was effectively over. Cynthia had already hired a top divorce attorney of her own. I took some satisfaction in knowing he'd be too busy putting out fires in his own house to offer Marissa much help. As for Marissa, she stayed out of sight around town. None of her close friends reached out to me beyond perfunctory polite messages, likely because they were either as shocked as everyone else or didn't want to pick sides. I heard through one mutual acquaintance that she was devastated and crying non-stop after losing her social standing and being publicly shamed. Apparently, some of her so-called friends had ghosted her, not wanting to be associated with the town's infamous adulteress. In a dark way, it was exactly what she deserved. The narcissist in her must have been imploding without the constant validation and admiration she was used to. Our divorce proceeded swiftly. With the evidence so clearly on my side and her benefactor distracted by his own problems, her lawyers pushed her to settle rather than battle it out. Within 2 months, we reached an agreement. She waived any claim to my family farm or the house, and I agreed to a modest one-time payout to help her get back on her feet, mostly to speed things along and avoid a prolonged fight. I would have given her nothing if I could, but Travis advised that offering a small olive branch would make a judge more likely to approve the settlement without question. So I parted with a small fraction of what I'd feared she might take. Money well spent as far as I was concerned. On a crisp autumn morning, a little over 2 months after that fateful night at the motel, I watched Marissa carry the last box of her belongings to her car. We'd arranged a supervised pickup for her things to keep things civil. One of her cousins came along to help and also serve as a witness that I wasn't doing anything crazy. I leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed, as Marissa closed her trunk and stood there for a moment. She turned to look at me. For a second, I almost thought I saw her eyes glisten, as if she might cry, but I kept my face stony. "Well," she said quietly, voice bitter, "you got what you wanted. I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. Happy wasn't the word I'd use. Instead, I just gazed back impassively. Marissa waited a moment, as if expecting me to say something, maybe to gloat or to apologize, who knows. When I didn't, she swallowed hard. Without another word, she got into her car and started the engine. "Goodbye, Marissa," I said softly, mostly to myself, as she backed out and drove away down the country road. I stood there until the dust from her wheels settled and the road was quiet and empty. Finally, I walked to the backyard, to the old oak tree that has stood there since my grandfather's time. Under its broad branches, I had set up a metal burn barrel. Inside were a few pieces of a life I no longer wanted. The remnants of our wedding album, some cards and letters she'd given me back when her words actually seemed sincere, and a couple of her forgotten trinkets. I struck a match and dropped it in. Flames licked up, curling the edges of photographs and turning dried rose petals to ash. I watched in silence. I expected to feel sadness, maybe nostalgia, or even guilt as I watched 12 years of marriage go up in smoke. But all I felt was relief. In the golden light of the bonfire, I caught my reflection in the house's window. There I was, just a simple rural man who had been pushed too far and finally pushed back. By any measure, I had won. As the fire crackled, I allowed myself a small smile. There's a saying that living well is the best revenge. Maybe that's true. But in this moment, actively engineering the downfall of those who wronged me felt pretty damn satisfying too. When the flames died down, I doused the embers and went inside. The house was quiet, emptier than before, but also peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. No more eggshells to walk on, no more constant criticism or deceit hanging in the air. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stepped out onto the porch, settling into my old rocking chair. The sun was setting over the fields, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I took a long sip and exhaled. I had my home, my land, and my dignity back. Yet as the evening breeze rustled through the trees, I felt a strange calm rather than any gloating triumph. In bringing them down, I'd burned away my naive, trusting self, leaving behind a harder but wiser man. It was a price I was willing to pay. A faint chorus of crickets began as dusk deepened. I closed my eyes for a moment, just listening. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt free. Perhaps that was the final irony. By unleashing hell on my wife and her lover, I'd found a kind of peace for myself.